Good evening. Good evening, Book Passage customers. Welcome to our event, our conversations with authors. We are so pleased to have you this evening. My name is Cheryl Bronstein. I am one of the event coordinators here at Book Passage, and I just want to thank all of our loyal customers out there who have been supporting us during these past 2 years. We really appreciate your business. Book Passage is open for business. We have 2 locations, our store in Corte Madera, and we have our beautiful store in the San Francisco Ferry Building. Both stores are open 7 days a week. You can come into the store and browse and shop. You can order online. You can give us a call. So thank you again for supporting independent bookstores. Your business is greatly appreciated. I also just want to mention that Book Passage has a very active corporate sales program. This is for business owners who are interested in bulk purchases. As we all know, books make the very best gifts. And if you are interested in gifting books to your staff or to your clients, we can help you do that. We can offer very attractive discounts. We ship all over the world. We can get signed copies of many books, and we can also arrange author Zoom calls with your staff or clients. So if this is something that interests you, please just call one of our stores and say, I'm interested in corporate sales, and we will get right on that and help you out. So again, thank you very much. We are very pleased to bring you this programming. We want you to stay up to date with all the amazing events that we have going on. We have both online and in-person events. So look at our website, look at it frequently because it is always being updated and we are adding all these wonderful new events. I do want to mention some of the exciting in-person events that we have coming down the line. We have an in-person event with Valerie Biden Owens. This is at Dominican University on Monday, April 18th at 7 p.m. Ms. Owens will be discussing her new book, Growing Up Biden, with our very own Elaine Petrocelli, and tickets to this event are still available. We also have a free in-person event coming up with Jasmine Darznik. She's going to discuss her best-selling novel, which is now in paperback, Bohemians. And this event will take place at our Corte Madera store, Saturday, April 9th at 1 p.m. So check our calendar. Again, everything is online. We do not want you to miss any of the wonderful events and classes that we have this month and coming into spring. Here at Book Passage, our mission is to enrich, engage, and inspire. And Book Passage has been a Bay Area institution for over 40 years. So again, a big thank you to our loyal customers. We look forward to serving you for another 40 years. Well, living in San Francisco Bay Area, I am always interested in what the San Francisco Chronicle has to say about books. And the Chronicle loves this book. Listen to the review. A House Between Earth and the Moon grapples with a gaggle of red-hot current issues: income inequality, surveillance, capitalist overreach, AI, cyberbullying, gun control. Rebecca Scherm packs them all into a powerful rocket engine of climate disaster, the biggest, baddest issue of all, and launches the whole shebang into space. It's a rocketing ride. This novel is propulsive, it is captivating, touching, funny, and utterly terrifying. It's addictive and fast-paced. Scherm's character-driven story centers on individuals working against the clock to find a solution to climate change. And if you are looking for a book about saving the planet, saving your family, and staying true to who you are, A House Between Earth and the Moon is the book for you. Rebecca Scherm is author of Unbecoming. She lives in California with her family. And some of her favorite things, unrelated to books and writing, are California native plants, ecology, and you'll be able to see her background that she really loves plants, praying mantis, the drink Corpse Reviver #2, fake fur, and she loves her heating pad. Now, she changes this list often, so maybe check back on our website next week to see an updated list. There'll be some new things on there. And this evening, she is joined by Edan Lepucki. Edan lives in Los Angeles, where she was born and raised, and she is the New York Times best-selling author of novels California and Women Number 17. And her short fiction and nonfiction have been published in Esquire, New York Times, Los Angeles Times, and many other publications. She is also the creator of At Mothers Before Instagram. And it is a great, great honor and pleasure to introduce two very talented writers, Rebecca Scherm and Edan Lepucki.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you so
I love
much.
that introduction. I was like, what is she going to say next about Rebecca? That's what I want to know.
I have a very short bio on my website because I never really want to say anything other than I wrote these 2 books. Here's my state. But people are always asking for more. And then every time they read the more, I'm so embarrassed. And then I have to go back and change the list. It's like an AOL profile from when I was 13. I'm like, oh God, what does it say now?
Oh my gosh. I think this setup is dangerous because I think we're going to forget that there are people watching and just spill the tea.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I have you big on my screen, so I'm not aware of anyone else.
Anybody. There's no one but you and me. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Book Passage, a store that I love. It's really exciting to do this with you. Congratulations on A House Between Earth and the Moon.
Thank you.
I just adore this book. I think it is such a risk-taking, compelling novel that I could not, I know people say this, but I could not put it down. So congratulations. Let's start with the basics here. Do you want to tell people just very briefly, can you say in one sentence what the book is about?
The book is about family life in 2033, the near future. A scientist who goes to a private space station that's a bolt hole for billionaires to flee climate change, to work on his own climate change fighting research. And his daughter, 15, who lives in Michigan, and the tech company who owns the space station, built the space station, those characters. And that's the tycoon who runs it, and the young, impressionable coder that she has hired to watch all of the people on the space station to build an algorithm.
What is she called? The algo?
The algo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tell me how this beast was born.
I was pregnant.
Never a good idea.
And I was freaking out about the life that I was imagining for my children. I'd always wanted to be a mother. There was no doubt about that. But then when I was pregnant, the reality of the future that my children would be inhabiting became a lot less abstract very quickly. And I thought that I could just work through some of those fears by writing a novel about it.
Mm-hmm. And
that did not exercise those anxieties. Often writing will sort of exercise my anxieties, but this exercise my anxieties. And then 7 years later, I finished this book that really just had me living what felt like part-time in the future that I was trying to imagine. Yeah.
And so you lived for the future for so long. How does it feel now in the present?
A relief.
To not be there yet?
Yeah, to not be there yet. But also, I think that writing this book in particular forced me to find hopeful narratives and plans and actions that real people are really taking now, where I might not have known to look for them before. I didn't really have the language to look for the people who are really making important changes and what those changes might look like, large and small. I had a sort of fundamental distrust of the intersection between technology and wealth, still have that, and a sort of abstract worry about climate change in a faraway way. We were living in Michigan at the time that I started this book. And when you live in a cold, damp place and you're worried about climate change, it's just a little bit abstract. But then we moved to California when I was maybe 5 years into the book. And then it really felt like I had been catapulted forward in time. In the way that I was writing about personal technology and the way that I was writing about climate change, it felt like I had been shot into my own book in a sort of freaky way. I live in Palo Alto in the belly of the beast. And it was both a blessing. It was a blessing for my book, but personally really unnerving to move into that place to finish it. Yeah. So now the book is finished, but I still live here and still care about affecting change in any way that I can, and protecting my children and equipping them with the resilience that I think they're going to need in this place. I'm still here. Yeah.
You said something really interesting in your interview in Elle magazine. You said, I'm only ever interested in things I don't understand yet.
It's a real problem.
I mean, is this for generally about your writing? I mean, maybe for your life too, but do you always start from that place where you're like, I'm curious about something I don't understand? So you're sort of against the write what you know dictum.
Yeah, it is not writing what I know in that way isn't interesting enough for me to dive in the way that you need to dive in to build the world of a novel. It has to be something that feels like a black box that I have to break into. And with my first book, I had a lot more to work with. I had some background in art history, and I just had even more pathways in. With this book, I made the completely insane decision to not just stray from my lane, but to like stagger onto another road entirely. I have no science background. But I just, if I'm going to throw myself in to something at that depth, it has to feel so mysterious that anything could happen. And to feel that mysterious, I really have to be kind of starting from totally zero. Yeah. I wish that I worked differently.
So you didn't know. So tell me about some of the stuff you had. So I assume, like, you mentioned this. I know you've mentioned this like physicist friend. I'm like, I don't know if I guess I've taught physicists because I have taught it. I teach at Caltech once a year.
You know scientists.
I mean, but so you were like, I need to figure out how to make a space station.
Yeah. So the space station itself. The station itself, I had probably the best time with the science of the station.
That was so cool about the spinning. I mean, I know nothing. Yeah. Maybe I'm the best reader for you because I'm kind of dumb. And so I'm like, oh, wow. Okay.
No, this is something I had to have this drawn on a paper napkin with a pen for me and like walked step by step through because I just don't have this background. I don't have this language. And the station, I'm not going to look behind me. I've fallen for that trick already. It's not really there. But the station itself is a ring, and it's based loosely or adapted from this idea of the Stanford torus, which so many of the space stations that you see in movies and on TV are based on this ring shape where people walk around on the outside and it spins to create the sensation of gravity. My physicist friend, his name is Sam, he's a dark matter physicist. He read an early draft of this novel. He read a draft so early that you might know what I mean, that you're embarrassed to think of it later.
I'm like embarrassed for you a little bit.
But the joke, it's not gravity. It's a fictional force within a non-inertial reference frame. That was one of his notes that he made in an early draft that struck me as so incredibly funny and pedantic and true. I ended up giving it to one of the characters. Yeah.
I remember they had this similar thing in Interstellar.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't understand why they're doing that. And my husband, who's not a physicist, is just a layperson.
Yeah.
He was trying to explain it to me. I was like, stop, I'll just do the science, and get to the next emotional part.
I get blinded with science pretty easily.
Yeah. Go ahead. I was going to say something I love about the book is the descriptions of parallaxis, right? Is that right? Like, it's so shitty. Like they have to like be putting these pieces together, and they have to be like designing the suite for this billionaire who's coming up there. So that's a really vivid, and then just the descriptions of how the effects on the body and just what it feels like and the fake sky and all these kind of things. That was one very vivid yet kind of antiseptic place that seemed like a bad IKEA kitchen sort of.
Yeah.
And then you have these very vivid experiences on this decimated planet. And both settings were so powerful to me. And I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit about place, of how that kind of begot story and character and theme and things like that.
I started out with the station looking at pictures of yachts, especially yachts belonging to like what they call super yachts. And I also was looking at a lot of projects by the late architect Zaha Hadid, and the way that she would use these curves and ribs that made rooms need to move. And I really loved that, and I wanted that for Parallaxis. So what I was trying to do was make a vision for the space station, and the vision would be very seductive, and the vision would sound like it would work. The problem is that the construction site is in space, and the people who are building it are people who have not worked construction before and don't have any real troubleshooting abilities. They just have like their flat packs of wooden pegs, or I mean, they're not wooden, of plastic, and they're printing out mattresses out of foam and stuff because their materials and their tools are so limited in that way, really by weight. Everything is limited by weight. Everything's made of like foam because anything nicer is too heavy to get up there. And I really enjoyed like painting a seductive picture for the Sun Sisters, like from their architect for the Sun Sisters, and then trying to look at how it would look if you walked into a super yacht after the end of like a long week at sea, and you saw what it really looked like, and there's just like hair and grime and fingerprints everywhere, and just to sort of look at the vision, the seductive vision from the underside of it. And you can also say like you also could have just looked at pictures of like Airbnbs. Imagine what they look like when you
and then you go and you're like, this is not nice.
Try to adjust the lighting in your mind like down, and then with Earth, with what's going on with Earth, I wanted to create a sort of, and this is real artistic license. I don't really mention, when I'm talking about what's happening on their home planet, I don't really talk a lot about built materials as much. Like it's like I wanted to have all of the human built materials in space. And then even when I'm writing about the Sun Sisters compound in Tikaboo, Utah, I'm trying to write about the rocks around them. And when I'm writing about the Welch Peters house in Michigan, I'm writing about how it's, it's like falling apart in a very loving family house sort of way. And there are stink bugs outside, and it's gravel, and it's all kind of, it's very grounded and kind of the way that you would crave, I think. The way that you would crave things that you could really grab onto that were really solid if you were up there in a giant plastic donut. Yeah.
I think it also creates like the as a reader on planet Earth, I'm not in a space station like you, the melancholy, the grief that people are talking about, that people are feeling already about climate, and sort of an elegiac feeling of all these things that you would lose if you were on that, if you were away from Earth.
Do you remember, you have done a lot of this world building too. In California, you did a lot of this world building. Do you remember what you were thinking about when you built your domes?
Those are inspired by, they're like these big spikes. They're inspired by an actual, there was a question about how they would describe like nuclear waste sites if like somebody who didn't understand like the fallout shelter symbol or whatever what could you make to make people not go there? And the spikes had been like one artistic rendering of an idea. And I just thought they were so interesting.
Yeah. I love your spikes. I meant your dome at the end of the book, but maybe I shouldn't talk about that.
But yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, my book is, I do not research. I'm like I just like to just totally pretend.
Yeah.
Like, but I tend to try to place my characters in situations where they, like in that book, they don't know a lot because they are kind of detached and like, that's what it'd be like if you don't have access to the internet and like, you don't really know what's going on.
Yeah.
So I tried to make it just a very specific kind of sensual, sensory experience of things, similarly of just like the landscape directly in front of a person, because I felt like I could just close my eyes and imagine that.
Right. And also, and that worked for that book because you wanted everyone to be very blinder. So
so that worked. Yeah. So then I got away with it. I hope I did. I didn't have to. I didn't have to do any research.
Yeah.
I did a little after the fact, but
a lot of the research, I don't know. God, it felt like I was always doing research. And then I was always undoing it and redoing it and then checking it. And then I went through a long period of like, okay, I'm just going to focus on the story. By long period, I mean like years.
Yeah.
And then as I was getting finished, I was just getting really like sweaty about the algae stuff. Like I was reading all these academic papers about algae and photosynthesis and P3 and P4 and feeling like, I think I understand this, but what if I don't? And then I found this incredible person, Dr. Emily Matula, who is a bioastronauticist who works for NASA and studies algae.
You just like found her. Do you know her or you just
No, I just found her on the internet and I was reading her papers and like trying to map what she's saying about algae and her research in algae onto the stuff that I had, made up. And my husband had sort of like made up in the kitchen doing the dishes. What about this? What about this? And then I would think, But he had said, like, why don't you just email her? Like, she might think that it's fun and interesting to talk to a novelist. That might be sort of a cool novelty to her, which would never occur to me, But I did. And she very generously did some fun Zooms with me, even read scenes. And I would ask her things like, so if you were in this situation with your algae, what is the worst thing that could happen? And her face would just like go white. She's like, wow.
I love it.
So glad. I was like, I had been jokingly calling this book an algae-based thriller for years, but I think talking to Dr. Emily Matula really made it into an algae-based thriller.
Oh my God, they should have put that on the front of the book.
I know. Why not? That should have been the big quote.
Like thrillers, like algae, I have the book for you. Wow. I want to talk a little bit about Mary Agnes. Mm-hmm. First, why does she have two names? If this is in the book, forgive me.
It's not in the book. It was cut from the book early on. It was one of those lengthy digressions that you write in your first or second draft that feel very, very important that you have to write in order to cut them. Mm-hmm. I take naming my characters. I'm very precious about it. Mm-hmm. I am looking at Social Security records in the state. I want to know what the popular names are. And then obviously Meg and Alex aren't going to choose one of the popular names, but I need to be sure that we're not on the list.
Yeah.
Mary Agnes Chase is the name of this botanist suffragette that I read about when I was reading about feminist botanists, because that was the direction that I went. And maybe now becoming a feminist botanist myself. Oh, but Mary Agnes Chase was an early feminist botanist who was arrested for like setting fire outside the White House to protest or something like that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And anyway, but the name seemed like the perfect name for Meg and Alex to choose to name their daughter to fully represent both of their passions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
Also, I like when characters are sort of burdened by their names.
Yeah.
Because so many people are actually, carrying around these like big names that represent the dreams of their parents. And
yeah, it
strikes me as very realistic.
It's true. And it's memorable. Mary Agnes, I love her. I just like, I think I told you, I was like kind of obsessed with her. Can you talk about creating her character? Did you like writing her? It seems like you liked writing her.
I loved writing her. And I don't know, I seem to still have the passageway in my brain open to being a teenage girl. It's like, it's just still there. I can still pretty easily slide back into that feeling of boredom and horror and not belonging and how they all happen at the same time. But Mary Agnes as a character was really born as a reaction to the anti-heroine of my first book. Her name is Grace, because when I was touring for that book, Gia Tolentino did the questions for me in New York, and she asked me if Grace could have gone down another path than the one that she went down on. And at the time, I was like, no, because I mean, I'd spent all these years thinking about this path, but that was a path where someone makes a mistake and they can't see a way out, and they double down and they decide that mistake is who they're going to be, basically. And I felt sort of dissatisfied by that answer, not with the character, just with my answer that she couldn't have gone a different way, because I am someone who really, really believes in mistakes and like the good power of mistakes to turn you into the person that you are capable of being. If you don't make those mistakes, how are you ever going to learn to forgive other people and to do better? And so I really wanted to write a teenage girl who makes a mistake, gets really down in it, and then finds a way back out. And where that mistake actually becomes, like they do for real people, can really become part of what makes her great in her life.
Yeah.
You know? So it felt like an act of compassion on an earlier teenage girl character that I had written.
Yeah. Oh, that's
but
interesting.
Also, I absolutely loved writing her, and also found her when you're a teenager, your personal disasters feel as big or bigger than disasters affecting millions and billions of people. And the scary thing about writing Mary Agnes is that her personal disasters felt that way to me too. The scene where she hasn't noticed that people are thousands of people are dying from a heat block because stuff is going on at school rings really true.
Yeah. I mean, but also it's so human that, I mean, a billion things, there's horrible things happening to the world right now, and
everywhere.
So you have a breakdown about something happening in your house, Right, so
exactly.
That's only to be expected. And I think that really grounds the novel, because that's what makes it so great. We have this combination of these big questions and these big events, and this there's a lot at stake. The whole earth is at stake. But then we really care about what happens to Mary Agnes at school.
What I wanted. And I think maybe that's one small advantage of being not a sci-fi writer who has stumbled into sci-fi, is that it is speculative, and it definitely is science fiction, but it's also really just it's a family drama. And to me, that comes first. I want to put the family in the world, but the family comes, those individual people and their individual crises come first for me.
Yeah. Have you had any reactions yet from the sci-fi world?
I was really scared about that, but Dexter Palmer, who blurbed the book for me, he wrote a book called Version Control that I really deeply admire. He said, by the way, if you are worried about the sci-fi community because that's not your home community, don't be. I think they're really going to like this. And I needed that little boost, okay, I can go into the party. Okay. And he was right. I mean, the book was in Science, the academic journal, which is
that's so cool.
Bonkers. To me, I'm just oh my gosh. I mean, I would say it's a terrible imposter feeling syndrome, but they know who I am. It's okay. They let me into this party for a minute, and I'm just appreciative. I think it's going well with them. I think it's going well with them, even though it's not my home house party. Yeah.
They're pretty, I feel like
there's an openness. There's an openness in sci-fi because there's a natural openness to possibility there. Mm-hmm. And there's not the same, the canon wants to be open, I guess. That's the nature of sci-fi. Yeah. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Even though I wrote this book that's sort of like Ann Patchett in space.
No, that should be on the cover. That's a really good blurb.
I tried that out as an elevator pitch.
I love it. What was I mean, maybe this is Mary Agnes's answer, but I know this book took a long time and there's all these research, but what came effortlessly that just was there from day one? That I always say that a book always throws you like one or two gifts. Like maybe one thing will be really hard, but this thing just was in place from the get-go and I got it.
Well, that was Mary Agnes. Once I had Mary Agnes, I really started building out from her. I had this character. I knew what was going to happen. I felt my way through it. It was what happens with Mary Agnes's storyline was less a series of decisions than embodying a character and following them. And sometimes when authors talk about that, when writers talk about like, oh, characters tell me what they're going to do, I don't believe them. Because I don't believe all of the characters give that to you.
Yeah.
But some of them can. Mary Agnes did that for me. And then once I understood something about her relationship with her father, what Alex's ambitions would be and how they would affect his family and how we would how he would be always having to weigh the sort of micro impact of his work against the macro potential of his work. Mm-hmm. And then I'm just asking all of these questions. Well, who was paying Alex to do this? And what would be the circumstances where this would happen? And then Tess was probably the last character for me to really open for myself because of my own personal mistrust of wealth and personal technology. She was very villainous for like the first 75 drafts. But like, look, I mean, I have friends who work for Facebook. I have friends who work for Google. I have friends who work for Apple. If you're interested in how things work and how systems work, and you are an engineer who had any interest in that might be where you end up. You can still be a person sticking to your ethics. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I really understood Tess as someone who wanted to use her powers for good and who could still be seduced by the promise of really thrilling data. Like any artist can be seduced by, a really thrilling idea. Mm-hmm. If you don't know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah. and you get the appeal because Tess is somebody who's brought up to the spaceship to basically train the algorithm to see. She has access to what everybody is seeing. So she has this like voyeuristic quality, which then allows you as the writer to have this omniscience and also gives the reader the voyeurism too, which is you kind of make the reader complicit, which is fun.
And as a writer, you probably feel this, but Tess is absolutely an authorial stand-in. Mm-hmm. Like she feels like she gets to watch the people and she gets to influence them. And it doesn't matter that she doesn't have a life of her own anymore because these are her people now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was me. Like, I think when I was trying to figure out the shape of this book early on, and I mean, early drafts had like 25 narrators. So I was just trying to look at this from every angle. But I think in like year 2 or 3, I read Middlemarch and understood like, oh, we can have 4 people with delusions of grandeur that are not going to intersect in the way that each person would like them to. They're all going to be cut off,
Yeah.
And then Tess then it was like, oh, so she's not Henry James. She's not God. She's deluded. It's more like sport and a pastime in space.
You're really bringing it. You should work in marketing.
That's what I got.
I should say that if you, I'm not clear what the YouTube page looks like, but you can leave a chat in the comments, and then Zach at Book Passage will beam it to us and I can ask Rebecca. So think about that. If you have a question for Rebecca or me, I don't know why you would have a question for me, but anyway, just wanted to put that out there.
To Edan. It will be destabilizing.
Oh my God. Let's see. What do I else have for you? So a lot happened to you over 7 years while you were working on this. I know you had no kids and now you have 2 kids. Yeah. How old are your kids?
6 and 2.
Okay.
So I started this book. I started it before I was pregnant. I didn't really start it until I was pregnant. And then the urgency of the freak out was what started really driving it forward. And then I had a baby, and then I had some gnarly miscarriages that really sent me like into a lost desert for a while. Mm-hmm. We moved again. I had another baby. I'm just extremely envious of writers who can crank out a novel every 2 years. Mm-hmm. I don't understand how that happens, but if they have any hot tips,
send them in the chat.
Yeah, send them in the chat. But my reality is like, I have part-time childcare, and that's a choice that I made.
Meaning you could have full-time?
I don't think I could afford to have full-time, but I also like it this way. It works out. I know that my second one I'm not having anymore, and I can hear them on the other side of the wall. We have an incredibly magnificent babysitter, Lydia, who they're overjoyed to see. And if they were not overjoyed to see Lydia when she comes, I don't know how I would write anything. Mm-hmm. But I'm sitting here in this office and I hear them on the other side doing all their stuff. And I have noise canceling headphones and everything. But the process of leaving one reality to enter another became much, much, much more complicated and choreographed once I had children. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you experienced this, but like I have to go into some sort of mental like airlock sort of between. Like first I have to come to the computer, and then I have to like read the news for half an hour just to be a person again.
Yeah. You have to do your Wordle.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes the Dordle, sometimes the Quordle if it's really bad.
I have not ventured into any of the other ones.
You don't need that.
I have enough problems.
I see that you are in a very closed space with headphones on, and I can tell that means that you don't need the Quordle in your life to separate you from the heathens out there.
Well, I can hear them. I'm like under my house, and there's they're overhead, but this is like, if you can see up, like there's you can hear everything that's happening up there.
Yeah.
I'm curious though, so it takes a lot for you to kind of lock into that. Yeah. The fictive reality. Was there something about this book that was a solace, or was it all like, was the book something that you looked forward to going to as or a way to process all the things that you had gone through, your pregnancy losses, your move, quarantine?
I'm curious if it's this way for you. It's easier over time, right? The more rich the world becomes, the easier it is for you to slip right into it. Mm-hmm. And you can't actually get into the world and make a mess in there if you have half an hour. Whereas at the beginning, when everything is uncertain, and it takes a lot more. Mm-hmm. This book was really hard to write. I wish that I had an answer that was brighter and shinier than that. But writing about the future, especially moving from the Midwest and then out to California and having 2 kids who are in the generation, they're not the same ages as the kids in the book at that time, but they're in the same generation. Mm-hmm. It was really eerie. There were some uncanny valley feelings sometimes about like, who is this happening to? And what am I, like, how are these fears that I have, much are they for the sake of this drama, and how much are they for my own children? Mm. I think that was really, really difficult. And I'm proud of myself to getting to the other side of it. but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to the writers out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny because the prose of the book is so fluid. I feel like I say that too often. So even though the book has really dark, heavy subject matter, it moves and is sort of has this polish and glide to it that makes it easy reading in some way without it being, it doesn't sound stupid. I don't know what to say.
Well, I think that's because it's about people, right? Because once you're with a character, you'll follow them.
Yeah. Well, how do you deal with sentence making? Like, is that a way into, like for me, I would say that, and I was just away writing without my kids for a week and I had a panic attack when I first got there.
Yeah.
And then I finally was like, just sit down and write. You can do it. You can do this. You've done it before. And then the way in was sentences. Like I was like, just put a sentence down and just go in there and tinker and move things around and think about how this I mean, I love to think about paragraphs where you start here, you end here, and how do you get the reader to get there? And that was the way to lock in to the fictive realm. So I'm curious if there was anything with sentences, or do you have any theories about sentences?
I'm tremendously envious of that. And that to me sounds like something that someone would say who remembers how important it is to read poetry. Which I forget. And then I remembered, I'm like, oh my God, I should be reading poetry every day. My mind would
be right?
Elastic,
we really should.
So much more nimble. Back the quartal.
Get some poems.
Yeah. No, it's not. That's sadly not how it is for me. I go into the figurative kitchen and I just make a huge mess. And I only think in terms of scene. That's
Interesting.
I only think in terms of scene at the beginning. And sometimes a lot of times, because I think if you put all of the pages of this book together that I have written, it would easily be 2,000 pages. And again, wouldn't necessarily recommend that to anyone else as a process. I would like to learn how to write an outline.
Okay, I just was talking to my editor about this. I was like, who actually writes an outline? He was like, nobody.
Nobody.
He was like, maybe a mystery novelist.
Maybe. Well,
and I think we have this idea that to like ascend into outline writing, but I don't know if anyone does. If you write an outline, tell us in the chat. We're waiting. We're going to hear from you.
What happens to me with sentences is that in the course of writing a scene, I'll write at some point, if it's a good day, I will encounter a sentence that I have written after I finish and be like, oh, that one, with that one, what I was trying to say and the style, like that one works. It's like, okay, I want everything to be more like that one. Can I keep that vibe? But it's always, I'm tripping on it. I'm not crafting them the first time through. I'm tripping on it. I absolutely hate drafting. I hate it. For me, it's all the joy and the satisfaction in writing comes with reading what you wrote yesterday, recognizing it for the pile of garbage that it mostly is, finding the, 10 to 20% that might have something good in it, and then trying to
do this.
It's like a makeup video and just blend. Just blend it in.
Just blend it.
Yeah. That's how I work. It's all just, and I mean, that's what I do every day. I sit down and I read like the last 5 pages or the 2 pages or the, God help me, 2 sentences that I wrote the day before.
Yeah.
Try to fix them and then pull the momentum to carry me forward.
Are you working on something new right now?
I feel so unusually superstitious about even talking about it because with this one, I was sure that I knew what it was about and I thought that I could knock it out in 3.5 years because I was like, well, I wrote a book in 3 years before. Now I have a baby, so maybe 3.5. I have started something, but I'm really going to try to just keep it.
Yeah.
Keep it in there. But
yes, keep it
what
precious.
I do know about it is that I want to write about friendship.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, because both of my books have been about secrecy and isolation. And I want to write a book that I want to live in myself for the time that it takes to write it. How spectacular and warm of a feeling that must be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like a book that makes me feel like I capture the castle
Never read. I haven't read it.
You should read it. My mother gave it to me a while ago, and I just thought, well, this is exactly the glass of wine and the cozy blanket that I needed.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
The last book I read that I loved was Angle of Repose.
Oh.
By your friend from Stanford.
Who?
Wallace Stegner.
Oh.
Like, who?
That was embarrassing. Cut that from the video. That was so embarrassing.
Okay. I was like, nobody ever told me that this Pulitzer Prize winning novel by this world famous author was so good.
I read I'm finally reading for fun again.
Mm-hmm.
For a few years, it felt like everything I was reading was
about algae.
Yeah, well, it's homework, in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm finally just reading for fun. But oddly, I'm also reading a lot of cli-fi because I want to know what everybody else has been writing about the climate while I've been writing about.
Oh, interesting.
Climate. Yeah, I thought Damnation Spring.
that person is going to be on my panel.
Oh, yeah. Well, I thought that book was great.
I'm in for a treat. Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was great. Yeah, and I read Peter Ho Davies' most recent novel. He's an old professor of mine.
Oh, yeah. I like him.
Great novel about fatherhood.
What is that one called?
A lie someone told you about yourself.
A lie someone told. I was like, It's called I want to tell you about you.
Maybe you're thinking of I Want to Tell You More, one of my favorite collections of all time. That's Jamie Quattrow from maybe 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Okay. No, but I like Peter Ho Davies' work a lot too. So that's been on my list. I'm behind, as everyone always is.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've just dedicated a shelf of our many bookshelves out there to the books that are the next in line. And I try to keep it coming. I don't like to be between books and not know what I'm going to read because it doesn't make you feel.
That's not fun. Let's see. We have a question here.
Okay.
This is a question from Rianu Keeves.
Oh,
hi. You think Keanu is actually in this? Is that
He's a big fan, actually.
Oh, yeah. Keanu loves you, at least. Mm-hmm. Hi, Keanu. Hi, Rianu. Is there anything about the experience of writing this book that made you less terrified about the future?
Yeah. Well, I really want to say yeah. I just said yeah because I really, really want to. No, I'm sorry. That's the truth. I want to be someone who can say yeah.
You know what's so interesting is that there are a lot of people who right now are reading romance novels, and that's great. I'm not saying don't read romance novels, but a lot of people are like, oh, I just really want light stuff because it's the times, which I get. Mm-hmm. But that is not the kind of reader that I am, interestingly. Yeah. I mean, maybe not interestingly, but I think about, do you know who M. John Harrison is?
No.
He's apparently famous. Mm-hmm. I believe he's a British sci-fi author who was very big in the early 80s. I think he was he's a legend, I think, in that community. Mm-hmm. But he wrote this blog post that went viral and is still reverberating it's called Against World Building.
Oh, I've read that. Yeah, continue.
Against the clomping nerdist boot of world building, and about how people want these enclosed worlds where the author just is giving you everything so that you are sort of you're not an active reader. Whereas and that's a really interesting idea. And the idea that our worlds are becoming more corporate and everything is sort of laid out for us while our real world just dies.
Yeah. Well, wait a minute. You might have given me an out of my own cynicism, which I appreciate.
Go ahead.
I do remember this essay, and I remember that I remember agreeing at least with large part of it because I really for me, the escape of reading a novel isn't usually that I'm reading something light. Something light will not help me escape. Something light just doesn't have a grip on me, usually. I need something to grip me enough to remove me from my own brain and transport me into someone else's brain to feel like I've escaped anything. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of reader I am. And there are science fiction writers who write really incredibly about solutions. Kim Stanley Robinson comes to mind. I mean, a Ministry of the Future is 800 pages of solutions that we could actually try.
It's amazing.
He's basically just writing proposals, and he's just come on, somebody
read this.
Yeah. But I mean, I was joking about this earlier, but I think that in writing this book and in thinking so much about big picture catastrophes, it created in me this sort of almost spiritual desperation for things that I could grab onto and earth things. I was already sort of a garden person, but it turned me into a sort of microclimate, microecology person. And someone native plant stan is another way to say it. But that particular community, the energy in people who are trying to create little ecological islands of functional ecologies that connect to other ones in tiny little backyards. California, it's really important to do, but everywhere. The way that you can actually affect real change, like the number of creatures that are alive, you can change that yourself. And that's just absolutely emotionally overwhelming to me, that you can grow food to feed caterpillars, to feed birds, to feed baby birds, to feed bigger birds. That has created a kind of, for me, completely shocking sense of hope and urgency in terms of like what I can do and what other people around me, so many other people are doing. And that is a project that's partially science and partially aesthetic. Like when I think about how much body image has changed in the media since I was a teenager, I think like, man, it would have been really nice to grow up with this media instead of that one. In terms of body positivity and like changing standards of beauty, et cetera, that also needs to happen with gardens. And that sounds like a small thing. It's actually a huge, huge, huge thing.
Well, it kind of reminds me of the encouragement of local politics.
Yes.
Like, well, think about the school board. It's too overwhelming to think about Congress. How about you could write a letter to your school board member and your civil council.
Yeah.
And that actually can make a discernible difference in your life and that you can see change happening. So
they are exactly the same approaches. So that is where I found not just less terror, but actual real hope and excitement.
So there you go.
Yeah. Can I start asking you questions or do we have other
go
questions?
ahead. No, we don't have any. I mean,
do you see, here's a question that I have you have also written 2 novels that are all about individuals. These are just literary novels about families and people. One of them is a dystopian climate novel. The other is an art novel. I have done the same, different order. What thread do you pull through your own work?
Good question. You know, it's funny. I think California and Woman Number 17 have some like they both cover the same amount of time. They both are about a 6-week novel, and they both are shifting POV.
Yeah.
And so on a structural, formal level, they're very similar to me. And I think they're both in some way, like they're about relationships. They're about intimacy and connection, and not, are you able to be yourself or not with somebody? The first book, I think, is about kind of an anxiety about having children in a certain kind of world. And the next one was like, I already had children when I wrote it.
Now what?
So that one is, dealing with some stuff about being a parent and what does that mean, being a good parent, or, inherited trauma. I don't want to say that buzzword, inherited trauma from your own mother's parenting and what they do to you, what they pass down, all that kind of stuff. So they kind of have a different tone, and one is first person and one is third, but they are dealing thematically. Like there was a point where I was like, I just wrote the same exact book, but nobody knows. Everybody thinks they're totally different.
Yeah.
And the book I'm working on now, which I'm on year 7 of working on, that one I decided.
Year 7.
Yes, year 7, lucky number 7. This will be the last one. It better be.
Yeah.
But that book is, I was like, structurally, I'm changing it. So this covers many years.
I was going to say, I don't think Time's Mouth can be 6 weeks.
No, it cannot.
Chimpy time machine.
Yeah. So this starts, as of right now, it starts in, with a character being born in 1930 something. it really starts when she's a teenager, and then we go to like 2011 or something. So it covers a lot more time. It has a more omniscient narrator. But again, it's about parenting and being parented and the past coming to get you and all those things. So it's thematically probably exactly the same as the other ones.
Yeah. Do you already, I mean, you're in year 7 with this. Do you think about the book after this in that sort of like longing way? Like what
sometimes I'm like, am I ever going to write a novel again?
Well, that's kind of where
the joke at my house that I make all the time is like, can't wait to write that top thriller after this one.
Yeah.
And it's going to take me 10 months and I'm going to be done. Famous last words.
That we have exactly the same joke in our house.
Yeah.
Can't wait to knock out that outline for that.
Yeah. So, but I am definitely thinking the next book, if I write another book after I recover from this one, will be much smaller, tighter.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it will be. When I thought that this book that I'm writing was maybe dead, I started a new book and it just didn't have that thing that means it's going to become a novel. It was just like paper dolls.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what it will be. Something might happen
when you drop it in the water.
Exactly. So I mean, I've been writing a few stories here and there, and those have been really fun to write. I like write them extremely quickly, and they just kind of come out of me, and I'm like, I'm done. But that's not really how the novel's been.
I envy you that. I think that short story writers are magicians.
Oh, I'm not good at them, I don't think. I think I've gotten better at them over the years, but I wrote stories in graduate school and it was until I started writing a novel that I realized, oh, this is my form. This is the thing that I want to do. Mostly because I love to read novels. I think novels are so fun to read, and just to be in the middle of a juicy novel is just such a pleasure.
Yeah. I have one good friend who, when she asks me for book recommendations, when she's in a rut, she'll pick something up and she'll be like, this doesn't feel long enough. I want to really disappear.
Yeah. Dive in there.
Yeah. She's like, come on, 600 pages, more Kate Atkinson. Come on, make it big.
She needs to start reading fantasy novels.
I'll tell her that.
Yeah. Hi, Cheryl.
Hey, authors, great event.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
All right, this was awesome. And I think one of the big takeaways is go plant your garden. Go impact the world and plant your garden. And A House Between Earth and the Moon. It is available for sale at Book Passage. Here we go.
I'll do it too.
You're disappearing.
Oh, yeah,
Why does it do that? That's what you get for being on a spaceship.
Yeah. We have Edan's books at the store. We have Rebecca's books at the store. Please come in and purchase this book. It is an amazing novel. You will not be disappointed. It's gotten incredible reviews. The sales are amazing. So add this one to your list. And again, I want to thank everyone who's joined us for participating in our conversations with authors. We are so pleased to bring you this programming. And this was a great hour. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Edan. And hopefully all of you out there will join us soon again. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you so much.